here with reaction to all of today's developments from Operation Epic Fury. Fox News strategic analyst General Jack Keane is with us. General, great to have you. I got to tell you, to me, the big story of the day is you have the next level in the first 30 seconds. With American intelligence and Israeli missiles, we were able to take out, not only the supreme leader, but, the top 49 leaders in Iran. Their next level in terms of government succession is their Supreme Council. Israel struck the Iranian leadership meeting as they were there gathering and voting to choose Hannany's replacement. And the head of the Quds forces was also taken out today. I mean, this is historic, what we're witnessing. Am I wrong? You studied at war colleges.
No, you're not wrong at all. I mean, I think what the Israelis have done, and I spoke to them when I was in Israel. I spoke to their military leaders and actually Prime Minister Netanyahu about it. I said, you have done something that's really quite unprecedented. The ultimate objective of war is to break your opponent's will, and the great strategist Sun Tzu said that's the start point right there. And if you take down leadership before the war actually begins, in other words, the opening shots are the leaders, the civilian and military leaders of the opponents you're fighting, you're already taking a significant step in terms of breaking their will. And what the Israelis have done in the 12-day war, they took down all of the senior military leaders and nuclear scientists as well. They did that with Hezbollah, we saw that, Sean, and they did it somewhat with Hamas. And here they helped with the United States together, did the very same thing. It was an opportunity, to be sure, with the Ayatollah and 45 plus of their leadership. I will tell you that that has a profound impact on the ability of the country to respond. I talked to the Mossad chief who told me that after they killed the leaders up front in the 12-day war, that impacted in their mind 60% of their response. So you can imagine what's taking place here and why we're having so much success. I mean, we're planned to have success, but it's really quite profound. And I'll tell you this, the leadership targets are going to be continued every single day. They're not just taking that first tier down. They want to strip the IRGC, the Basel militia, the police enforcers, the governors, the parliament, the Security Council. They want to strip those leaders down because this is what sustains the regime. It's not just the weapons, it's the people themselves. So this leadership focus, Sean, is going to continue throughout this campaign until both of these forces are satisfied that they've accomplished that piece of the mission. The other thing is obviously to focus on ballistic missiles. And that is center of gravity, to be sure. And I can tell you from talking to the leaders on our side as well as the Israeli side, after 3 days, Sean, the facts are that they have been able to reduce the attacks by 75%. That is incredible. Yesterday it was 50%. So what we're doing here is quite significant. A couple of more facts that are important. Only 10% of the penetrators are getting through. 14% did in the 12-day war, over 20% when the Iranians attacked in April. Now it's down to 10%. We're talking about saving lives here, for sure, in their ability to do that. The Iranians were expected to bring salvos of missiles, 25 to 50 at one time, Sean. They're only doing 2 to 5. And we can see it. You see it when our coverage is up there. That is dramatic in terms of the impact. On the drones, they're tougher to take down, obviously. But nonetheless, the commanders of Central Command, and the drones are being fired mostly against U.S. bases. The distance is too great, to go into Israel. They certainly learned that from the 12-day war. They're sitting there waiting for them to come for 6 to 8 hours. But the drones are certainly hitting our bases as well as ballistic missiles. What the commanders have said is that it has not interfered in their operation, and it has not diminished their capabilities whatsoever. Sadly, though, 6 of our soldiers have been killed. and that we honor that service. And believe me, Sean, this campaign that we're running, no one's going to forget those soldiers and others who may perish. And we're going to make certain this is finished and those deaths are not squandered. That's for sure. Go ahead, Sean.
I don't believe the constitutionality. I don't believe it's valid, the executive order that would prevent America directly from taking out leaders or targeting leaders. Some people have a different opinion on that. In this case, we allowed the Israelis to do it, obviously with combined intelligence from both countries. Your thoughts on that, and do we need to arm those civilians that had taken to the streets that were being mowed down by the tens of thousands?
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of any restriction on taking down leaders of countries that we're fighting a war with. I mean, I don't understand anybody who would suggest something to the contrary. If we're not at war with a country, then there may indeed be an issue. But we are now at war with this country. That's a fact. We're in conflict operations, and certainly leaders, whatever their description is, that leaders of a country, either they're national civilian leaders or military leaders, are all leaders, and they're certainly vulnerable to attack as far as I'm concerned. In terms of arming the people themselves, I would pause on doing that. I wouldn't rush into that. The reality is there's not organizations out there. In other words, there are protesters. If there was an organization out there, Sean, they would have killed it. The Iranians are all over the population. And I don't think just arming them and creating that, upgunning that level of violence is what we needed. If we are able to accomplish the mission here, Sean, that I'm laying out in terms of the systematic and methodical bringing down of the infrastructure that is sustaining the regime, that regime is going to be so weakened that they're going to be somewhat vulnerable, to be sure. And I think the reports are there's already divisiveness inside of the regime. It's not surprising, Sean. You start to lose all your leaders and you see your weapons being taken down in terms of ballistic missiles and drones on a regular basis. People are starting to think, do we really want to stay a part of this? We're likely going to get killed. And who do you trust? Can you trust the guy on the left? Somebody's providing exquisite information to be able to attack these leaders as successfully as we are doing. And that in of itself creates a degree of distrust. Yeah.
The executive order that you may want to look into, and I take issue with its constitutionality, is Executive Order 12333, signed in 1981. But General Jack Keane, very informative, up to speed. We really appreciate the information. Thank you, sir. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.